with Jerry Grant today, and Jerry was the first man to go 200 miles an hour on a track. Is that right?
Well, I was fortunate enough to average over 200 at Ontario in 1972. And if you look at the background here, you'll see a sister car to the car I drove. Bobby Unser drove that car, and I drove the other car for Dan Gurney. And I lucked out in that Bobby blew 3 or 4 engines trying to break the barrier on Saturday, and so they ran me for the record, and I got up to 200 plus, and it was a real different ride. The car would get sideways in the turn, scrape both tires on the outside of the wall, and it handled like $1 million, but I'd never been that fast into a turn before. So it didn't make my teammate Bobby very happy because he had been running about the same speed. Anyway, that car was no doubt in my mind that I couldn't win the race the next day, and I blew on the first lap when it strained the engine and going 200. All like Bobby had done, blowing the engines. So when you're first to 200 or first to do something like Roger Bannister, the 4-minute mile, it never goes away. And when you're when you're a retired race driver and you look back on the scene and the people run into you that know something about your background, they always bring these things up. I still hold the track record at Le Mans in France. And some of the race buffs will say, well, that was back in 66 or 67. That couldn't be. Well, in reality, they changed the course. They wanted to slow the cars down, so they put a little chicane in the middle of the straightaway. So I still today hold the track record at Le Mans in a Ford GT40. So as the racing programs go on, these cars of Dan's, and I think Bobby would agree, he helped in the development. Dan is a heck of an engineer and one of the greatest drivers that ever happened. And I not only learned from Dan, but I did learn some things from Bobby too. He didn't teach them to me on purpose, I'll guarantee you that. But you know, when you talk about race teams and you got 2 drivers, they might not necessarily be in love with each other. It's a very competitive game, and a lot of times you just don't want to divulge why you're a little quicker than the next guy. The car sits here in the Riverside Museum with a very impressive array of other Indianapolis and various race forms, and all of them are winners in their own, and I see probably more Dan Gurney cars here than any other one make. So as a good friend, he also was one of the greatest car builders.
Absolutely. What was it like driving that car with unlimited boost?
Well, when we went 200, we had the boost, which is the amount of air that can be pumped into the engine at maximum, and we had a big blower. And that gave us somewhere in the realm of possibly 1,200 horsepower. Our dyno would only go to 1,000 horsepower. So being the first time that I had ever driven with that kind of horsepower, first time I went down the straightaway, it was like trying to hold on to a tail of a bull. The car felt like a AA fuel dragster, break loose in every gear. And it got up to speed, and going into the turns where I had gone in before, I had more power, so where I got back into the throttle brought the rear end out. And you can't lift at that stage of the game because these are turbocharged, and they don't like the throttle to come off. So in other words, sometimes when you come into traffic, you got to slow down with a turbocharged engine, you run it against the brake so that the fuel is still going into the turbo, but which makes it a little more difficult to race. And as we went on in a history of developing these type of engines and working with turbocharged engines, this response got better and better until today you don't even know that it has a turbocharger on it. When you talk about 1,200 horsepower in a car that light, it was a handful. When I came in from 4 laps, the tires have very thin white sidewalls. So when you scrape the wall as a driver, you know that you're very marginal on when that thing's going to pop. And the temperature of the tire is critical. And it was a very hot day, and we were sideways a lot, which puts more temperature in the car. So I was conscious of all these things, and also conscious that they gave me the signal that I had run over 200 on the first lap. So, you know, ego of a race car driver. In other circumstances, I might have pulled it in and made a little change, but it was mine for the taking, and I capitalized on it. But when I came in and stopped, I didn't get out of the car real quick because I had to get, you know, my composure. And of course, there was a lot of cameras and microphones and etc. And regroup who I was going to thank as sponsors and etc. And I didn't want to walk away from the car with sweat coming off my face. And it's all you know, a little bit of a drama when you do something that's really exciting. And the experience of being the first or winning is something that's very tough to describe to anybody. It's in racing, you have highs and then you have lows. The lows are really lows. And especially when you go into a race and you think you're going to win, and some little 2-bit item goes away and you lose the race. Well, the excuses don't get you anywhere in racing. You either perform or you don't perform. What a guy told me a long time ago, by the name of Roger Penske, who I used to race with, that he thought I was extremely fast, but he said, "Grant, you're going to have to learn how to finish." And those words rang a lot of times in races. And the equipment that I was fortunate enough to drive for Dan Gurney was very reliable and probably, in my opinion, best car on the racetrack. I liked it when I was winning. So when I was winning in a sports car, my preference was sports cars. If it was open wheel cars, it was open wheel cars. There were certain courses that I took great pride in winning, like Monterey or Indianapolis or Le Mans, or even in Targo, Florio, in Sicily. Dan and I drove. We got first in class. And when you do that with a Cobra, with all due respect to Shelby, it was probably the worst handling car I ever drove in my life. But the power to weight ratio was pretty good. So in that case, you just hung on to it. You go down the straightaway, and it was crowded and a 2-lane road, and you were bouncing from side to side. So when you came up on a slower car, you kind of just hoped that you'd bounce the right way, because you were closing on it like 40, 50 miles an hour. And again, you can't back out. If you back out, you're going to be running the back of the pack. So it all gets down to, I think, time and grade and opportunity. There's a lot of fine race car drivers that never had the opportunities that I did. Would I do it again? A drop of a hat. Did I sleep in the back of a station wagon towing my race car across the country? Yeah. Was McDonald's the best meal that I ever had an opportunity to eat? Yeah. Was I broke? Oh yeah. But I wouldn't give it up for anything. It's a long cry from where we pulled up with a trailer, unloaded the car off, and the crew had to wait until we got paid off from running the race so we could give them their salary so we could get a steak meal. And also, we drove every kind of car. We'd jump from an Indy car to a sports car to a NASCAR.